Welcome to the Two Step Podcast. My name is Bag,
And I'm Meg.
and this is going to be an episode on the effect of crypto mining on computer prices. So, recently there's been a lot of controversy and a lot of just misinformation and people having no idea really what to do because mainly the price of GPUs has been like skyrocketing because people are using them to mine cryptocurrency,
Topical.
which the big one that everybody knows is Bitcoin, but there is literally like
The main
hundreds
reason,
of different cryptocurrencies.
yeah, so a lot of people will know about Bitcoin. But the reason why miners are getting popular all of a sudden is because of altcoins or alt currency. So currency that is similar to Bitcoin but isn't Bitcoin. Because they're easier to enter to.
Yeah, there's like hours that we could go into on the intricacies and differences between the different cryptocurrencies, but we're not going to do that here. This is mainly on the effect that it's having on computer prices. So in recent time now, this is mainly in the last like 6 to 8 months,
Yes.
where crypto mining has become like a big thing. I know in I think it was November of 2017 is when the really big boom happened and Bitcoin hit like 20K almost. That was when a lot of people got into it, and it really did affect the prices of the cards by like 20 to 40% in some cases.
The problem, the big issue is that, so the media made articles about Bitcoin, which then of course rises its popularity with a mainstream non-finance based people. So there are now a lot of people who frankly have no business being in finance investing into Bitcoin. Now, this isn't to say that an average person can't invest into Bitcoin. It's that Bitcoin should be treated less as a currency and more of stocks. It's a speculative thing. It's speculation, exactly like the stock exchange.
Yeah.
Because until more retailers actually permit you to buy using Bitcoin or any other alt currency, its value is not as great as fiat, right? It just, because you can't use it anywhere.
Yeah, the value is whatever people are willing to buy and sell it for, which is very volatile right now. Like,
people asking, what is the purpose of Bitcoin? Why is it so popular? What value does it have? And the reality is that at the moment, it doesn't necessarily have any intrinsic value for most people. So a lot of people are buying into Bitcoin because they think that they can make money. They want to make money. That's the same with the stock market, right? People go and invest into stocks because they want to make money. It has nothing to do with supporting a business, right? If you're a shareholder of a company, you're a shareholder largely because you probably want to make money. That's the intention. You might like the company's idea, but ultimately you want a return. This is the same with Bitcoin. But, what was that? Speak too long and you forget exactly what you're going to say.
And you get the talk goblins.
Yeah, you get the talk goblins. The problem... so what I was... Yeah, people are asking the actual value of Bitcoin. And for a lot of people, there isn't. But the two biggest values is anonymity, and which isn't necessarily true for actual Bitcoin, but is true for a lot of alt currencies like Monero. Mm-hmm. And the second is there is no third-party interruptions. Nobody like the government or Visa or your bank can freeze an account when a transaction is made.
Yeah, you actually own your money instead of the bank basically owning your money and saying, yeah, you have access to this much right now.
The easiest comparison to make for people who don't understand Bitcoin is that it's digital cash, and it is literally digital cash. Mm-hmm. Credit and debit, right? Money in your bank account, that's not actual money, right? We put a value on it, but that's just a number in an account, and that's not technically money until you go to a bank and withdraw it, right? It's just a generally accepted way of purchasing stuff. But Bitcoin is like digital cash because you have a Bitcoin and you're trading somebody directly via peer-to-peer. That's how the concept works. You don't have to do that, but that's usually how it works. It can be done without any middleman, and that's the main benefit.
And the way that this all the way that this all ties into the cost of GPUs going up is that the whole idea of the cryptocurrency is mining. And to simplify this, basically, is that when you're mining, you're completing transactions for the blockchain. Now, when someone goes and they want to take Bitcoin and they want to buy someone else's whatever other currency with it, the people who are mining Bitcoin are doing that transaction for them. And when you successfully complete a transaction for someone, you're rewarded with a small amount of Bitcoin. Now, nowadays,
I guess a real world comparison was when we had the gold standard, or when everything was made of silver. Somebody has to go and mine that silver, and that person gets paid for the purpose, right? That's
correct. You're basically just doing that for them. You're making that transaction. You're using your computer power to be the server for them. And that's where you get the intrinsic value of mining. Now, for Bitcoin, this is no longer very useful. There's plenty of people that still mine Bitcoin just for the service of actually allowing it to exist, but that's the main problem with Bitcoin compared to altcoins. But stepping back from all of that extravagantness, we're going to move to why this affects it. So you need a graphics card to do these kind of calculations. The calculations are advanced enough because they are encrypted that only a graphical card can actually do the amount of calculations needed.
This is largely because of the way that GPUs have been designed as opposed to CPUs.
Correct.
GPUs can have a higher processing power on the point, where CPUs don't necessarily.
And to even further backtrack, a GPU, for some of you that aren't as savvy as well, a GPU is your graphics card in your computer, and the graphics card is basically like its own little tiny computer that's just made to do graphics and graphical calculations. That's all that it does. It has its own RAM, its own board, it has its own everything. But what is happening is that these cryptocurrency miners are buying all of the graphics cards, and this is mainly in the lower and the medium end. This honestly hasn't really affected the very high end cards like the 1080s and the 1080 Ti's and Titans and all of those kind of cards. It really doesn't affect them.
Which are cards that most people won't be buying anyways.
Correct. So this is irrelevant to most people. So the cards that they're buying are like the 1060s. The 1060s have kind of been all bought up, and now they're buying 1070s, they're buying 1050s, and they're not really buying any AMD cards because the AMD cards are not really that great for cryptocurrency mining right now. They don't. There are some of them that are good. They're actually more efficient, but we're not going to get into that. But anyways,
base calculation, my card can run better than a 1070 slightly, but it has diminishing returns with the more you add.
Correct. And the power is another issue. They're more efficient in the long run, but you have to think of the cost of electricity and all this other stuff that goes into it as well.
Now, getting away from all that, I think it's important to explain the backstory for people who aren't in the know. The main question is, why is this happening? And is it as big a deal as people think it is? And the reasons why are a little more complicated than, people are getting into crypto mining. That is one part of the deal. Another problem was that the graphics cards were never massively stocked to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. If you remember when the RX 480 came out, the AMD's RX 480, which isn't a GPU mining anyways, but this affected the 1070 as well. When those two cards come out, the 480 and the 1070, they were never in high stock. They were sold out very quickly for about, I think it was like a month before I could actually get my own.
I remember they were extremely sold out almost instantly because it was a great price point for what you got. I mean, it was the new generation. It was what, like $250, something like that?
Yes, that's how much it was. And they're great cards, right? I have a 480. I love it. Magnificent card. But there was never enough of them. And people were buying them out so that they could resell them on eBay for twice as price, right? They were price hiking it themselves. But that's one massive issue. And to this day, this is still an issue. NVIDIA and AMD just don't produce the amount of cards that are necessary. Primarily because previously they wouldn't have to spend that many cards because there wouldn't necessarily have been as many PC gamers. But now they have to market for PC gamers and crypto miners. And I know that Nvidia has released a public statement saying they don't want miners to buy their cards as a sort of PR thing. But that's irrelevant. That's not, you can't stop that. That's not going to happen, right? It's a thing that they have to deal with. Maybe if they printed more units, we wouldn't have as big of a problem.
The other thing to think about, though, is that there is some cannibalizing of sales for them, because the aftermarket cards for cryptocurrency are huge, because those cards are in perfect condition most of the time, because they undervolt the cards very heavily to make sure that they use as little power as possible. So one of the biggest issues, actually, and this is the main thing that Nvidia is worried about, is that the cards are never even making it to retailers. That's the biggest problem, is that most of their marketing, you don't market towards the cryptocurrency people because they're going to buy them anyways. Most of their marketing is falling on deaf ears, and they're not getting the word out about the cards anymore because people are never even getting access to the cards. The high stakes cryptocurrency miners are literally buying them from the distributors. They're buying pallets filled with the cards from the distributors.
Yes, another thing too that is really important. So the biggest issue here is that people want to buy a computer, right? They want to build their own computer. They want a graphics card. They want a decent graphics card for a cheap price. They want to pay $300-400 for one, perhaps, not $1,000, which is how much I saw the 1070 going for, which is just fucking ridiculous, right? It's a good card. It ain't that fucking good, all right? I could get a Titan for that much.
Yeah, so it's a ridiculous price for it.
Right, yeah. Right, so if you have $1,000 and you're thinking of spending it into a card, just buy the high-end cards because that's how much they are. And you probably won't have to replace it for a good 10 years anyway.
Yeah, like I've had my 980 for like 2 or 3 years now. And I game at 1440p.
But I think there are some exaggerations and a bit of fear-mongering here. So first of all, the average GPU, in my experience, right, has a lifetime of 5 years. That is to say, you won't be forced to upgrade the card to play new games for at least 5 years. Obviously, if you want to play the latest games at the highest graphics all the time, you're probably going to have to replace your card, I would say, every 2 to 2.5 years. Keeping in mind that new graphics cards come out every 6 to 12 months. So upgrading every 6 to 12 months is not a reasonable thing for people to expect to do for most people, right? It's just, that's not a thing. You do that if you're an enthusiast and really want the power. You don't have to do that if you're a PC gamer who just wants to play games.
Yeah, if you're a little bit more savvy and you're like selling your old card to someone to make up some of the cost of it, that's one thing, it's fine. But it really does scare people away from buying computers, because they're thinking, oh wow, I'm spending $1,500 on a computer and I'm gonna have to replace this in a couple of years. Like I could just buy a console for $200 and then I'm good. But
which you will still replace in like 5 years. So.
Correct.
Right.
And the problem is that the prices on console games nowadays, for what you really ultimately get, like this is a big pain point for me, because I do like consoles to some extent, but they have to have more value than just the intrinsic value of, oh, I'm a good game. It either has to be exclusive, which is unfortunate, or it has to have some kind of extra feature to it, like the Switch has, where it's portable and it has extra things to it.
There is no intrinsic value over using a console versus a PC, because they're both computers, but the difference is a PC can be used for anything a lot easier. You can play music, you can make videos, you can watch videos. You can do that on a console, it's just not as easy. You can get apps like Discord, right? You get your browser, which is a lot easier to use. So exclusives were the main way they sold games, but they're not doing that a lot now, because PC gaming, I guess, is rising in popularity and people really want to use.
It's taken long enough.
I mean, I say this, but we still get treated like second-rate citizens.
we absolutely do.
Right? Like, and I acknowledge that without consoles, PC gaming wouldn't be a thing. I think people people forget that consoles were gaming. Like, I mean, yeah, we had things like the Spectrum, right? But consoles,
And
the
the
NES
Commodore.
console, oh yeah, and the Commodore, and they were great, and they were before my time. But the thing is that gaming skyrocketed when Nintendo decided to come into the fray, and when Sega
Big Daddy
decided to come into the
Nintendo.
fray, and when Atari decided, oh, let's make consoles, not just computers, and that changed everything. But
Yeah, and nowadays it's like one of the biggest things that people say is that the graphic fidelity, how good the actual game looks when you're playing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of buzzwords that the console marketers throw out there. They're like, "Oh, we're going to be having our consoles in 4K and you're going to be able to do 4K." And did I mention again that it's 4K when
yeah, you mean
yeah.
the TVs that people don't probably have?
Yeah, it's cool that you're going to be doing 4K, but are you still going to be sitting at 30 FPS? Because to me, 30 FPS feels horrible now because I've been used to 60 or more FPS for so long that because my younger siblings have like they play exclusively like PlayStation and Xbox, right?
Yeah.
And I go and I look at these games and I think in comparison to what I'm seeing on my computer screen when I'm playing a game in comparison to what I see on their televisions, it looks horrible to me. Like,
it's just
it's acceptable.
Oh yeah, but any kind of fast movement becomes extremely horrible, right? It doesn't matter if you were playing like a simulation, like The Sims, or an RTS game, or a strategy game like Civ, which don't really exist on consoles anyways. But they're fine because they're relatively slow. They don't use a lot of frame rates. But when you're playing an FPS game where you need to move, or you're playing an action-adventure game like Dark Souls or Devil May Cry, and again, there's high movement, you will know the difference because it lags. It just feels sluggish to move your controller, your cursor from one end to the other.
Yeah, and without getting into like the whole issue of FPS games on consoles, another thing that people don't realize is that frames per second matter so much for games because when the game updates, like when it updates the positions of whatever you're doing, like if you're playing a shooter game and the game is updating the positions of all of the characters in your game, if your console is only putting out 30 frames per second, it's only got 30 options to choose from per second. Whereas if it's doing 144 frames per second, there is much more often going to be a more relevant picture in front of your face than there would be if it was only 30.
Yeah, this is a thing that's different in animation because in animation, one frame is an entire image. You see everything that happens on a movie in that one frame happens at the same time. But in games, that's not the case. There are different frames of animations happening simultaneously in the same 3D space. And all of those have to be rendered live. And that takes a lot of processing power. But we are sidetracking here quite significantly from crypto mining. Yes.
Yeah, so the biggest thing about it is it worth it? I mean, do you just take the easy route and go with the console, or do you go for something opinion here, but going for something that's far better if more difficult?
So, of course, I got lambasted for telling people this on Reddit that they should just buy a console, given the ridiculous amount of prices for GPUs.
Sure.
Right? The reality, but my post was merely stating that if your option is to buy nothing or a console, right?
Buy the console.
Or rather, the specific question here was actually pre-builts versus consoles. And a pre-built is anything from a manufacturer, right? An OEM manufacturer like Dell, HP, Asus, whatever. And the question was, is it worth buying a pre-built? Because it's generally considered a pre-built is nowhere near as strong as a custom-built computer, and they tend to be 2 to 3 times the price. So the question is it worth buying a pre-built and then using that to upgrade later on as opposed to a console? And I personally don't think so. I just don't think it's worth it. I would rather have the console now, particularly because there are still exclusives that exist for consoles, so at least you get access to that. Of course, this is if these are the only two options, pre-built versus console. Whereas my actual opinion is you should wait. Especially right? Like, my opinion is that again, going back and noting that you do not have to have a new GPU every 6 to 12 months. It doesn't, you don't have to do it, right? So knowing that, you can easily wait a year or two, because Bitcoin and alt currencies are very volatile. We don't know if they're going to rise in price or crash in price. Given the publicity and the controversy, they could easily crash, or they could do what Bitcoin does. Well, actually, Bitcoin's a really good example, because Bitcoin literally doubled in price in the span of a week, and then over the course of a month, it crashed massively.
Yeah, and here recently, like what was it, like 2 weeks ago? It had like a 50% correction or something like that. It dropped down to like $9,000
Now
after
people
being
are,
at like 20K, and
yeah,
people
it's funny
freaked out
because
about that.
people freaked out because they think that's a crash. Well, that's not a crash. That's how much it was previously. It was,
Yeah,
right.
it's a correction. We're
it's a
still
correction.
above where we were 2 months ago, so it's like, we're still up, even though we're down almost 50% from what we were
The difference
at the top.
being is that when it reached 16,000, that was a spike. That was what you would call an anomaly, brought largely because of media perception and lots of people thinking that they could buy in and make money. People who don't seem to realize that buying at a peak is a really, really silly idea.
One of the worst things you can do. I mean, there were stories of people mortgaging their homes, pulling people's graduate or college funds. I mean, ridiculous stories of things that you should legitimately, like. If I can give you, the listener, any financial advice, don't never take all of your money and do something with it.
Yeah,
never do that. That's like the worst thing you can do.
I want to iterate here that I am not a financial expert, right? But there are two genuinely accepted rules in investing on anything. It doesn't matter what you're doing it. There are two rules when it comes to investing. The first is, do not buy at an all-time high. You can, but it is extremely risky, and even professionals don't do it, right? Generally. Because it is, by its very nature, risky, especially with things like stocks and Bitcoin that are completely speculative and could crash at any moment. The second rule is, never, ever invest what you cannot afford to lose. I mean, this just should be basic knowledge, right? You don't go out and buy a TV if it would leave you broke. So why would you invest in Bitcoin for the same ring? You might as well take your money and go to Vegas and gamble it away, because you have the same odds of losing it as you do with Bitcoin.
Yeah, that sounds like a better option to me in some cases. Unfortunately, it's just
at least you're
going
at
to Vegas and throwing it, right? Yeah, you can do whatever you want in Vegas, man. With Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, you're just like, all right, I'm going to press a button. Oh, I lost all my money. Whoops.
When it comes to crypto mining too, my computer decided to almost sleep on me there. Sorry.
Nice.
That would have been bad. That's what happens when you don't move.
The show must go on though, Mag, so let's continue.
Going back to crypto mining, it's interesting too, because it's like, is it worth it? Is crypto mining itself even worth it? So I think it's not worth to buy a console or any of that now. I think you should just sit on it and wait a bit. I think if you really want a game and you don't have a good PC, I do think you're better off buying a console, but that's just me. You could also buy a relatively cheap pre-built and use that as a base to upgrade later. That is a viable option. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. But another question is crypto mining itself actually worth it?
Honestly, like, if I was to give my true opinion, unless you already know what you're doing, no, I don't feel that it's worth it. Because you have to know as much as someone trading and more to be efficient with crypto mining, because you have to have all of the technical know-how as well as the trading know-how.
To elaborate on why I agree, though, I actually think you are better in investing into Bitcoin itself or into any of the alt currencies themselves as opposed to mining. And the reason for this, there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is that you have more control. You can bow out at any time and cut your losses, right? Once you have spent money on a GPU, though, you have to mine until you make the money, right? That is a sunk cost from the get-go. If you go and spend $1,000 or even $400 on a GPU right now, you have to wait until you've made the money back on that GPU before you make profit. This is no different than buying a house with the intention to rent it out later. You still have to pay the mortgage on that house. You're not making any money on that house until you've actually paid the mortgage off. Even if you take half of the money for yourself, you still have to pay the mortgage off. That's the same with a GPU. And at the current rates calculated, you can make about $4 to $5 profit a day from one GPU. That's a 1070, right?
And that's if you're running it on the right cryptocurrency and you're getting there is some luck to it. It's a small amount of luck, but
assumes you're running the correct current. There is calculators for this, but it is assuming you're running the correct currency. You're running it 24 hours a day. And it assumes that your power is costing you 12 cents per kilowatt. If it costs more, you will make less profit. If it costs less, you will make more.
If you're spending like $800, it's obviously just, some quick math here, but it's like you would have to run it for close to like a third of a year.
No, it's 3 months.
Like a third or a quarter of a year to be able to get your money back, depending on the card that you buy.
It's 3 months if you paid $400, roughly. It's 200 days if you paid $1,000, right?
So you really got to think there. It's like, yes, you could make your money back from the card, but if you're mining this cryptocurrency, you don't know what it's worth. It could be worth a ton later. It could be worth nothing later. If you look at like the prices right now, it's just looks like someone is having a heart attack, basically. So
I'm not a financial advisor. I would totally recommend going to a financial advisor if you really want to invest. If you have some spare change and you want to invest into something, you're better off paying a financial advisor. I think that is an actual good investment because they're a professional. Or just doing more research than watching a 17-year-old on YouTube. Please don't do that.
Yeah, you don't want to get into a situation where, you're listening to some teenager on the internet tell you what to do with all of your money.
You shouldn't listen to anyone on YouTube, to be honest.
Yeah, pretty much. Especially not us. You would never want to listen to us right here at the Two Step Podcast, your favorite podcast that you always listen to.
Not for investment advice, right? Like that's...
Yeah, don't listen to our investment advice. We know nothing, so just ignore us on that. We're mostly just talking here, but really, this all brings us back to one big question. This isn't the biggest question. This is probably the second biggest question of it, is that does thinking about all of this for the average person, does it make it worth it to build your own computer? Because let's be honest here.
With the current prices?
Building your own computer is far superior in almost every way to buying a pre-built, besides the fact that it's harder. That's basically the only difference. And that you get some kind of all-in-one guarantee warranty with buying a pre-built, right? That's basically all that you get.
Yeah, the only difference here is if you want a laptop. Because if you really, really want a gaming laptop, you're fucked.
For some reason, you're going to be paying $1,500 for a computer equivalent or a PC desktop equivalent of like $800. You're going to be paying almost double to get the same amount of power.
But that's the price you pay for the portability. That is the sacrifice.
Yeah, they have to cram all of those big giant devices into this little thing that doesn't overheat and has a good screen, and you can carry it around with you, and it doesn't weigh 1,000,000 pounds. There's a lot of crazy technology going into it, so you're getting what you pay for.
I can tell you they're not bad. They're really good computers. They're just not cost effective. That's really it. They're just very expensive for what you get.
Like I have a work laptop. I have to have a good work laptop that I can do a lot of graphical power and everything on. And it's it's got like a 1060 and a bunch of other stuff like that. It's I don't know the brand off the top of my head because most of the time when I work on it, I remote into it. But I have a work laptop that has an i7 6700 HQ and a 1060 6GB version in it, right? And it's a great laptop. It's wonderful. I use it for work if I have to go somewhere, I have to travel, or I just want to work from my bed because
And the thing is, all the major brands are good for laptops. People like Acer and MSI are really those are the two brands that I prefer when it comes to Asus or Asus, however you're supposed to pronounce it. Asus and MSI are really two good brands that I really like for kind of any kind of technology like that. But I still wouldn't buy a laptop. I'm recommending those brands personally, but I wouldn't buy a laptop.
Yeah, and if you need a brand for me, EVGA all the way, but they don't really make laptops. But anyways,
Yeah, they're
So
good.
building a computer, is it worth it? I think so. I think it's a skill. It's something that you could learn. Honestly, it's like adult Legos. To be honest,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
really not as difficult. It's not this daunting, insurmountable task that people make it out to be. It's just. I mean, like think about the first time you ever had to put RAM into a computer. I mean, that's a scary moment, you know. It's like you're sitting
Oh,
there with your computer and you're sitting there and you're leaning into it and pressing and it's
nah.
not going in. You're like,
The scariest part of building is the first time, because you have this part that everyone's told you if you fuck up, you'll fry it, and oh shit, you never get to use it again. Oh no! All
are
right,
you
now
talking about the CPU?
I'm talking about everything. All right, now
Everything.
it doesn't, because when you're a first time, you don't know. You know, you just see a bunch of green mess and just electronic components everywhere. You're just looking at this going, what the fuck? All you have to do, right, when you have a computer, specifically like a pre-built, if you buy a pre-built, another thing too is you can buy off websites that then build the computer for you, and that is usually still cheaper than buying a pre-built. That's what I did.
Hmm.
When I when I had my first computer, I chose the parts and I just paid, a premium for the putting together, and after that I just upgraded. The first time I had to build my own computer from scratch was when you replace the motherboard. The motherboard and the CPU are the two really big parts here that freak people out, because the motherboard specifically has stoppers on the back of them, so it doesn't rest directly onto the back of your case, because if it did, it would short circuit, right, and it
Yeah,
wouldn't
and it
work.
doesn't have like the garters that some of the other pieces have. You pull out a motherboard and it's just like this is looking like fancy technology and it's got a bunch of resistors and things that look like they could break on it, you know.
Yeah, things that could pop, right? A lot of things that could explode just randomly. It's not like, RAM, especially RAM and the GPU today, they are covered in just everything. Like they have plastic covers.
Heat spreaders and all kinds of other mumbo
Yeah, but you
jumbo.
could touch those with fucking anything. You could drop them on carpet, probably. I'm not suggesting that, all right? Don't
Yeah,
do that.
please,
But
please don't.
I'm just telling you that GPUs and RAMs have a lot of protective coverings now to allow a safe removal and whatever. You could just play with those all day. But it's not really that. The worry here is just don't install on fucking carpet and don't wear track pants. Is really
Yeah,
what I would
just
recommend.
just touch the case every once in a while to get rid of any static
No,
electricity.
you
Don't.
can't touch the case because most cases are laminated. That won't.
Yeah, it's true. You could touch the inside of the case.
But you can touch the inside of the case, and that will ground you. As
Yeah.
right. Alternatively, you could do it outside. Literally, that will earth you. You are touching the ground. Don't
I
recommend
don't know. Yeah, because like hey, summer rain. You know,
But I
just
mean,
take a page out of Double D's book.
there are people who have attached all of their parts to big noteboards. You know, like the cork noteboards. They just slap
Yeah,
their
where they
fucking
like
parts on
hang
them.
it up. Like there's ones that people like hang the parts from the ceiling and just like
I
Frankenstein them
almost-
together with cords.
I need to get a few more hard drives. If I get another case and a few more hard drives, I would have because I always keep my parts. I keep all of my working parts. The only parts that I haven't been able to keep is my power supply because it just crapped out, and my graphics card. Actually, I have a really old 9800 graphics card. You remember that?
Oh wow, that is old.
That was my original graphics card back when it was really good. I have one of those, and I did have... No! Is that the card I have? Or is that the card I killed? I've killed one graphics card in my time making computers because I'm confident enough that I don't care where I do where I do the installations because I'm super careful. And I accidentally dropped it on carpet.
Ooh.
I have
Ooh,
done the
that's bad.
thing. I have.
Oh, that's bad. That's like making me physically cringe right now.
I have experienced
Ugh.
the case where I've killed a card and I had to have a friend buy me a new one and I had to pay them back.
Oh, that's horrible.
I've also done it with RAM. But the RAM was
So-
shit anyways, I was replacing it.
So many horror stories. But anyways,
But it's not common.
Yeah, we've hit over our time though, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. Remember, guys, if you like what you heard and you want to hear more from us, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And also, to the side of the subscribe button, there's this little bell, since YouTube has decided to make it where even if you subscribe to someone, it's not going to tell you when we upload a video. It's just going to be in your subscription. So if you hit that bell and you turn notifications on for us, you will be the first to know that the Two Step Podcast has posted a new video. So make sure to do all of those things, social media, yada, yada, yada. We love you guys, and good night.